દુઃખ તપ્તાનામ પ્રાણિનામ આર્તિનાશનમ. હરિ અહિંસા સત્ય અસ્તેય બ્રહ્મચર્ય અસંગ્રહ શરીર શ્રમ અસ્વાદ સર્વત્ર ભયવર્જનમ સર્વધર્મી સમાનત્વા સ્વદેશી સ્પર્શ ભાવના વિનમ્ર વ્રત નિષ્ઠા સે ये एकादश सेव्य है. विनम्र व्रत निष्ठा से ये एकादश सेव्य है. सर्वत्र सुखिनः सन्तु सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमा भवेत्. हरि ओम. शांति शांति शांति.
નમસ્કાર. 21મા પ્રાધ્યાપક રામલાલ પરીખ સ્મૃતિ વ્યાખ્યાનમાં અપ્રત્યક્ષ રૂપે હાજર સહુ કોઈનું ભારતીય સમુદાય શિક્ષણ સંઘ વતી સ્વાગત કરતા હું આનંદની લાગણી અનુભવું છું. આ વાર્ષિક વ્યાખ્યાન શ્રેણી અમારી સંસ્થાએ સ્વર્ગસ્થ રામલાલભાઈના વૈકુંઠવાસ પછી તરત વર્ષ 2000માં પ્રસ્થાપિત કરી. પ્રતિવર્ષ નિયમિતપણે આયોજાયેલી આ વ્યાખ્યાનમાળાનો પ્રમુખ ઉદ્દેશ્ય રામલાલભાઈના વિચારવ્યાપ તથા કાર્યવ્યાપને સુસંગત થાય તેવા જુદા જુદા વિષયો ઉપર વિદ્વાન ચિંતન મનનકારો, કર્મશીલો તથા શિક્ષણવિદોના વિચાર બહોળા સમાજ સુધી પહોંચાડવાનો રહ્યો છે. વ્યાખ્યાનોની એક વીસી પૂરી થઈ અને તેના તરફનો દ્રષ્ટિપાત એ દર્શાવે છે કે વિષય વૈવિધ્ય, વિષય પ્રસ્તુતતા, વિષય ગાંભીર્ય અને ઊંડાણ તથા વ્યાખ્યાતાઓની કક્ષા એ બધાની મૂલવણીમાં આ વ્યાખ્યાન શ્રેણી સ્વર્ગસ્થ રામલાલભાઈને સંતોષ થાય તે રીતે પોતાનો ઉદ્દેશ્ય સિદ્ધ કરી શકી છે. અમદાવાદના રહેવાસીઓ આની પુષ્ટિ કરશે તેવી મને આશા છે. I feel happy in welcoming all the invitees who are watching this 21st Professor Ramlal Parikh Memorial Lecture live. This memorial lecture was instituted by Indian Society for Community Education, an NGO founded by late Professor Ramlal Bhai, who passed away for heavenly abode in 1999. Professor Ramlal Bhai was a historian by education, but after participating actively in Gandhiji-led India's freedom movement at his young age, he chose to work for Gandhian values and ideals. After a brief stint of working at national level in youth activities, he selected education to be his principal domain of activities, though his involvement continued remaining in many areas of constructive socio-political areas. At a very young age, he accepted the responsibilities of managing the affairs of Gujarat Vidyapith, an educational institution founded by Gandhiji himself in 1920. He, till his last breath, remained engaged with the affairs of Vidyapith, lastly, as its chancellor. In the process of his long association with Gujarat Vidyapith, which became inseparable from Ramlal Bhai, he built it as a premier educational institution known not only in India but abroad also for its unique educational programs centering around dynamism of Gandhian thoughts, adapting to the ever-changing need of building capabilities in the youth so that they can be effectively and constructively useful in the Herculean task of nation building. As the Vice Chancellor of Gujarat Vidyapith, the onus fell on Ramlal Bhai to spread the message of Gandhiji among various segments of society and institutions, both nationally and internationally, and he excelled in that. He worked on many committees, missions, groups at the highest level everywhere and contributed immensely in many ways for the cause of human-centric developmental interventions influenced by Gandhian thoughts, values and ideals. In the course of doing all these, he adorned many positions including becoming MP, received several prestigious honors and played key roles in the foundations of many institutions and missions. This lecture is very regularly organized in his august memory, wherein expert thinkers, constructive work leaders, opinion builders who are striving for qualitatively better, more human and inclusive society. So far, luminaries like Ahangamaya Aryaratne, who is also known as Gandhi of Sri Lanka, world famous expert in conflict resolution Dr. Johann Galtung, scientists of global eminence Dr. M.S. Swaminathan and Dr. A.R. Mashelkar, highly successful business person of extended Gandhi family Rahul Bajaj, flag bearer and wizard of Indian culture Dr. Karan Singh, spiritual leader Murari Bapu, lords in the British Parliament Dr. Bhikkubhai Parikh and Dr. Meghnath Desai, thinkers and opinion builders like Rajmohan Gandhi, Yogendra Yadav, Ashok Bajpai, Pawan Kumar Verma, and core Gandhians like Ravindra Verma, Chandrasekhar Dharmadhikari, and Sudhir Chandra, among others, have delivered this memorial lecture year after year. Lectures covering a large canvas of themes, ideas dear to late Professor Ramlal Bhai. So many among these speakers had direct connect with Ramlal Bhai and had worked with him for quite long. વર્તમાનમાં આખા વિશ્વને ધમરોળી રહેલી તથા પજવી રહેલી કોરોના મહામારીએ દરેકના વ્યક્તિગત તથા સામૂહિક જીવનમાં નવા સામાન્ય ધોરણો પ્રસ્થાપિત કર્યા છે. તેમાંનું એક છે વિજાણુ વ્યવસ્થા સંચાલિત તથા તે દ્વારા દોરવાતી અપ્રત્યક્ષ હાજરી ધરાવતી સભા. આજનું આ વ્યાખ્યાન આ પ્રકારે દેશ વિદેશમાં ફેલાયેલા અદૃશ્ય સભાગારના શ્રોતાજનો સમક્ષ બેંગલુરુ સ્થિત વિદ્વાન લેખક, चिंतक तथा निवृत्त सनदी अधिकारी श्री पास्कल एलन नेज़रथ द्वारा अपाशे. जो एक विचार करवा बेसीए कि आवा प्रकारनी व्यवस्था पण कोई भला कारणसर स्वर्गस्थ रामलाल भाईना जीवनकाळ दरमियान उपयोगमां लेवाई शकाई होत तो तेओ तो गतिना, वहेवाना, नावीन्यना, प्रयोगना, પડકારના, વિશ્વ પહોંચના જીવ હતા, જેઓ ઈયુની સામાન્ય સભાને સંબોધવા માત્ર હાથમાં ફક્ત ખાદીની નાની થેલી લઈ વહેલી સવારે બ્રસેલ્સ પહોંચી પ્રવચન આપી વળતી મુસાફરી કરી દેશ પરત કરી ફરી વિદ્યાપીઠમાં પોતાની ઓફિસે સીધા કામે લાગતા હોય તેવા રામલાલભાઈ જેવા કર્મઠ વ્યક્તિએ તો આ સ્વરૂપ તથા માધ્યમને લાગલું જ અપનાવી દીધું હોત. જો અને તોની આ કલ્પનામાં વિહરીએ તો કહી શકીએ કે વિદ્યાપીઠ તથા અન્ય સંસ્થાઓનું ફળદાયી સાર્વત્રિકરણ કરવામાં રામલાલભાઈ વધુ સફળ થયા હોત. I feel extremely happy and delighted to inform the invisible learned gathering that the 21st Professor Ramlal Parikh Memorial Lecture will be delivered by Shri Pascal Allen Nazareth. Economist by education, Shri Nazareth is a career diplomat who held very high offices in consular missions of several countries including the US. He also served as ambassador and high commissioner to many countries besides holding other equally high and responsible positions in organizations around globe and in India. Shri Nazareth went much beyond the field of diplomacy and successfully strode into the scholastic world. He has lectured at most prestigious and globally high-rated educational institutions all around the world, as well as at the UN and at other such institutions of high esteem in other parts of the world. His major area of literary thinking and work got more influenced by Gandhiji and his ideal on non-violence. He has written two well-acclaimed books published in many Indian and foreign languages, whose foreword in European languages has been written by none other than Mikhail Gorbachev, former Soviet president. For his such a valuable contribution, he was presented U-Tha Peace Award, putting him in the league of galaxy of eminent leaders like Pope John Paul II, the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, among others. His profile in brief is annexed to the invitation for this lecture. You are requested to read that for learning more about the distinguished speaker of today's lecture. Shri Nazareth has chosen to speak on the imperative need of reviving Gandhiji's ideals and strategies in contemporary India. આજના 21મા સ્મૃતિ વ્યાખ્યાનના વ્યાખ્યાતા શ્રી પાસ્કલ એલન નેઝરથ વિશે હું જેને નજરે જોઈ શકતો નથી તેવા સભાગારના માનવંતા શ્રોતાઓ સમક્ષ ટૂંકાણમાં જણાવતા આનંદ અનુભવું છું. સમગ્ર જીવન ભારતીય એલચી કચેરીઓમાં ઉચ્ચાતિયુચ્ચ હોદ્દાઓ ઉપર સફળતાપૂર્વક જવાબદારીનું વહન કર્યા બાદ તેઓએ ગાંધીજી તથા તેમણે પ્રબોધેલા અહિંસાના મૂલ્ય ઉપર ચિંતન મનનસભર લેખન તથા પ્રવચન કર્યા. જુદા જુદા દેશોમાં સ્થાપિત અને કાર્યરત અતિ વિખ્યાત શૈક્ષણિક સંસ્થાઓ જેવી કે ન્યૂયોર્ક યુનિવર્સિટી, કોલંબિયા યુનિવર્સિટી, યેલ યુનિવર્સિટી, સ્ટેનફોર્ડ યુનિવર્સિટી, MIT, IIM બેંગ્લોર તથા તેવી જ અન્ય ઘણી સંસ્થાઓમાં તેમણે મનનીય વ્યાખ્યાનો આપ્યા છે અને આપે છે. આપે ગહન વિચારને પ્રેરે તેવા ગાંધીઝ આઉટસ્ટેન્ડિંગ લીડરશિપ તથા ગાંધી સોલ ફોર્સ વેરિયર who revolutionized revolution and spiritualized it નામે બે પુસ્તકો પણ લખ્યા છે જે બહુ નામના તથા સ્વીકૃતિ પામ્યા છે. ભારતની તેમજ દુનિયાની ઘણી ઘણી ભાષામાં ભાષાંતરિત આ સર્જનો શ્રી નેઝરથની ગાંધીજી તથા તેમના વિચારો અંગેની ઊંડી સમજ દર્શાવે છે. અનેક માન સન્માન મેળવનાર આજના આ વ્યાખ્યાતા અમને મળ્યા તે બદલ ભારતીય સમુદાય શિક્ષણ સંઘ તેમના પ્રતિ આભારની લાગણી વ્યક્ત કરે છે. તેમના પ્રવચનનો આજનો વિષય પણ ખૂબ જ ઉપયુક્ત છે. પ્રવર્તમાન ભારતમાં ગાંધી વિચાર અને કાર્યરીતિને પુનઃજીવિત કરવાની આવશ્યકતા. આઇન્સ્ટાઈન ભાખી ગયા છે તેમ ગાંધીજી કોઈ દેવ સમાન એક સાથે તેમના સમયથી અતિ દૂરનું સર્વલક્ષી સર્વવ્યાપી દર્શન કરી શકતા હતા, જ્યારે સાથે સાથે વર્તમાનમાં સ્થિત તેવા વ્યવહારુ પણ હતા. તેમણે અનુભવસિદ્ધ પ્રમાણિત કરેલા કાળજયી જીવન સિદ્ધાંતોની આવશ્યકતા તેમના પછીના સમયમાં તથા તેમની શારીરિક અનુપસ્થિતિમાં એક દીવાદાંડી સમાન છે અને દરેક સમયે દરેક ભૂખંડને પોતાની મૂંઝવણ પોતાના પ્રશ્નોને સચોટ માર્ગદર્શન આપતા રહેવાના છે. વ્યાખ્યાન સમયે આપ સહુના વીજાણુ સાધનને ધ્વનિશાંત કરાયા છે. આપને તે સ્થિતિ ચાલુ રાખવાનો અનુરોધ છે. બિફોર આઈ રિસ્પેક્ટફુલી ઇન્વાઇટ શ્રી પાસ્કલ એલન નેઝરથ to deliver 21st Professor Ramlal Parikh Memorial Lecture, I will request the Chairman of Indian Society for Community Education, Shri P.J. Devetia, to welcome him by saying few words. Shri P.J. Devetia, please. The devices of all the listeners are centrally muted. I request everyone to remain muted only unless otherwise instructed.
Our distinguished members for today's function of welcoming Professor Ramlal ji. I would like today first, I must say that Professor Nazrat ji, Dr. Mandaben Parikh, Sri Mangbhai Upadhyay, and all those present in this occasion. This is an excellent occasion for me to speak about, especially for Professor Ramlal ji. He was indeed a stalwart in the sense that he had contributed his might in various fields in the best possible manner. We shall always remember him, particularly about his contribution, not only in education, but also in other related fields, which have got of influence on education and other way of thoughts of human personality. At this stage, I would like to remember the great people who visited this institution, like Sri Rahul Ji Bajaj, then several others like Dr. Karan Singh Ji, and also other dignitaries like Arya Ratna, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Professor Gaitung, Sri Rajmohan Gandhi, Sri Dr. Bhikhu Parikh, and so on. There are still many others who have also visited at different times. I had a few occasions of meeting dedicated Gandhians, whom I am not listing right now, but they have always influenced me in one way or the other. I used to get overwhelmed by their dedication, and I feel humble to offer my Anjalis to all such persons who, over a period of time, have influenced me by Gandhian thoughts and spirits. This has given me a different strength in my life. I welcome you all once again on my personal behalf and on behalf of ICE. Namaskar.
Thank you, Devetia Sahib. I now request Shri Pascal Allen Nazareth to deliver 21st Professor Ramlal Parikh Memorial Lecture. Shri Nazareth, please.
Like you can you bring my picture on the wall? Esteemed Chairman and Trustees of the Indian Society for Community Education and all the distinguished people who are attending this lecture. I'm greatly honored to have been invited to deliver the 21st Professor Ramlal Parikh Memorial Lecture. The distinguished founder of this renowned society, Professor Parikh, is widely revered as a Gandhian educationist, first Vice Chancellor and later Chancellor of Gujarat Vidyapith, which the Mahatma founded in 1920, and for his lead role in promoting adult and community education all over India. As the earlier 20 of these lectures have been delivered by internationally renowned intellectuals such as Professor Rajmohan Gandhi and Johann Galtung, Padma Vibhushan, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Lord Meghanand Desai, and Bhikkhu Parikh, it is with considerable trepidation, therefore, that I deliver this lecture. Gandhi was born in the 19th century. The major part of his life and work took place in the 20th century. So why is he of vital importance to contemporary India and the world? My lecture is a modest attempt to answer this important question. The 20th century was the most blood-stained in human history. Almost 100 million people, most of them civilians, were killed in its two world wars, Hitler's gas chambers, India-Pakistan, Arab-Israel, Iraq-Iran, and the Korean-Vietnam wars, and national liberation struggles and tribal conflicts in Africa. The 20th century was also history's most racist and revolutionary one. Racial oppression was widely practiced in all the European empires, as also in the USA and South Africa. Fascist and Marxist revolutions occurred in Italy, Germany, Spain, Russia, China, and Cuba. Humanity yearned for freedom and peace, but every effort it made failed to secure them. Soon after the atom bomb drops on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Albert Einstein ruefully declared, "The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything but our thinking. Thus, we are drifting towards a catastrophe beyond comparison. We shall require a new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." Gandhi's great pertinence to contemporary India and the world is because in the most bloodstained century in human history, he enunciated this new manner of thinking and an effective praxis to arrest humanity's ominous drift to the catastrophe beyond comparison that Einstein had spoken about. What was Gandhi's new way of thinking? I shall present this in his own words. There is an indefinable, mysterious power that pervades everything, a living power that is changeless, that holds all together, that creates, dissolves, and recreates. That power is God. This God is a living force. He who denies the existence of that great force denies to himself the use of that inexhaustible power. Satyagraha is soul force, pure and simple. It connotes the living law of life. This law will work just as the law of gravitation will work, whether we accept it or not. In politics, its use is based on the immutable maxim that government of the people is possible only so long as they consent, either consciously or unconsciously, to be governed. Gandhi's praxis for the effective implementation of his new way of thinking was to put one's whole soul against the will of the tyrant and be assured that working under this law of our being, it is possible for a single individual to defy the whole might of an unjust empire and lay the foundation for that empire's fall or regeneration. This amazing assertion was vindicated by Gandhi's remarkable achievements, first in South Africa, 1893 to 1915, and then in India, 1917 to 1948. By painstakingly building up and leading fearless, non-violent, soul force movements, he ameliorated the political and social conditions of South African Indians, and then liberated India from colonial bondage by plucking the brightest jewel from the British crown and steering a highly feudal, deeply caste-ridden, women-suppressed, and minimally enfranchised India into a secular democracy with universal adult franchise. This amazing polity elected a woman prime minister and an untouchable president in its 19th and 50th year of independence. During the same period, over 100 former European colonies attained independence, and communist dictatorships all over Eastern Europe, military dictatorships in the Philippines, Argentina, and Chile, racial discrimination in the US, and apartheid in South Africa were terminated with Soul Force People's Power Uprising led by his disciples. Václav Havel of Czechoslovakia described its Soul Force uprising as the power of the powerless. A similar uprising, triggered by an Afro-American seamstress named Rosa Parks, by refusing to give up her seat to a white man on a Montgomery city bus in December 1955, put a black president in the White House 53 years later. Because of these remarkable Soul Force achievements in the latter half of the 20th century, humanity had high hopes that the 21st century would be replete with peace and progress. Its dawn was celebrated with euphoric gusto all over the world. The cataclysmic 9/11 terror attacks on the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington, just 20 months later, were therefore a stunning betrayal of these high hopes. About 9/11, Joseph Nye wrote in his 2002 Paradox of American Power book, "This terrorist attack is a terrible symptom of deeper changes that are occurring in the world. A technological revolution in information and communications has been diffusing power away from governments and empowering individuals and groups to play roles in world politics, including wreaking massive destruction that were once reserved for governments of states. Privatization has been increasing, and terrorism is the privatization of war." At the April 13th, 2010 nuclear summit at Washington, President Obama averred that a terrorist securing a nuclear weapon was the single biggest threat to US security, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. In the 2 decades after 9/11, there have been terrorist attacks in London, Madrid, Bali, New Delhi, Mumbai, Moscow, Istanbul, Tel Aviv, Tokyo, Karachi, Lahore, Colombo, and Kabul. Another terror attack has occurred in Kabul just last week. The terrorist bomber has already emerged as the defining symbol of the 21st century and the architect of the ominous new era of asymmetric warfare. 9/11 has also radically changed the traditional concept of war and essentially made all the armies, navies, and air forces of the world obsolete. The recent humiliating retreat of US Army and Air Force battalions and squadrons from Afghanistan and its takeover by the Taliban is stark proof of this. It is also notable that the 14 Saudis and 4 Egyptians involved in the 9/11 terrorist attack had used US flying schools to learn how to fly, US aircraft, US gasoline, and US airports to destroy 2 of its most iconic national assets in just 1 hour. Jonathan Schell, in his Unconquerable World, Nonviolence, and the Will of the People book, while acknowledging the gravity of the new asymmetric warfare scenario, has written, as the new century begins, no question is more important than whether the world has now embarked on a new cycle of violence, condemning the 21st century to repeat or even outdo the bloodshed of the 20th. He has pointed out that the present dangers are not, as before, the massed conventional armies and systematized hatreds of rival great powers, but the persistent and steady spread of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, and the unappeased demons of national, ethnic, religious, and class fury. He has averred that notwithstanding the shock of 9/11 and the need to take forceful measures to meet the threat of global terrorism, a new and promising path has opened up. For in the 20th century history, another complementary lesson, less conspicuous than the first, but just as important, has been emerging. It is that forms of non-violent action can serve effectively in the place of violence at every level of political affairs. This is the promise of Mohandas Gandhi's resistance to the British Empire in India, of Martin Luther King's civil rights movement in the United States, of the non-violent movements in Eastern Europe and Russia that brought down communism and the Soviet Union. Besides the terrorist and asymmetric warfare threats, the 20th century also faces serious challenges from radical religious ideologies, ultra-nationalist political parties and governments, misconduct at national and international levels, mass unemployment, deepening social inequalities, environmental destruction, and global warming. Gandhi, with his prophetic vision, had foreseen many of these problems. In his 1909 Hind Swaraj, he had indicated that he had written this book in answer to the Indian school of violence, and that it was an attempt to offer the revolutionary something infinitely superior, retaining the whole of the spirit of self-sacrifice and bravery that was to be found in the revolutionary. He had declared, however much I may sympathize with and admire worthy motives, I am an uncompromising opponent of violent methods, even to serve the noblest of causes. Acts of violence create bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyer. Gandhi's approach to militant violence was twofold. On the one hand, he sought to convert the hate-filled, violent revolutionary into one motivated by truth, love, and non-violence. On the other hand, he sought to fathom the root causes of his hatred and violence. He averred 3/4 of the miseries and misunderstandings in the world will disappear if we step into the shoes of our adversaries and understand their standpoint. He had also averred peace will come, but truth is pursued, and truth implies justice. Putting ourselves in the shoes of our opponents and fathoming why jihadi and other terrorists embark upon their despicable acts is not as difficult as is generally assumed, since many of them leave farewell messages furnishing a reason for their acts. These generally indicate either perverted assessments of the person they assassinate, or outrage over denigration of their prophets and sacred books, destruction of their places of worship, invasion and occupation of their countries, and massacres of their religious brethren in various parts of the world. Gandhi's assassin clearly indicated why he had shot him. Samuel Huntington, in his book, The Clash of Civilization, Remaking of the World Order, has provided a clue to the prevalence of intense resentment among Muslims against the US. He has written, the West's efforts to universalize its values and institutions, to maintain its military and economic superiority, and to intervene in conflicts in the Muslim world generate intense resentment among Muslims. During the 15 years between 1980 and 1995, the US emerged in 17 military operations in the Middle East, all of them directed against Muslim states. No comparable pattern of US military operations occurred against the people of any other parts of the world. Since 1995, 5 other Muslim countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and Palestine, have been devastated by invasion, occupation, or bombing by the US and its allies. Gandhi's persistence to contemporary India and the world is not only in probing terrorist mindsets and combating their violent acts, but also in combating all the above-mentioned 20th century threats. Gandhi's great contribution in the religious and communal harmony fields was to give primacy to truth and rationality rather than conformity to traditional practice. He averred, "I reject any religious doctrine that does not appeal to reason and is in conflict with morality." Though a deeply devout Hindu, his actual religion was that which transcends Hinduism, which changes one's very nature, binds one indissolubly to the truth within, and ever purifies. It is the permanent element in human nature which leaves the soul restless until it has found itself. He had also averred, "The essence of all religions is the same, only their approaches are different. Independent India, as conceived by me, will have all Indians belonging to different religions living in perfect friendship." By defining his religion in these terms, he raised it to the level of spirituality. This is what the 20th century very much needs. It has too much of religiosity that divides and kills people, and too little of the spirituality that unites and uplifts them. Johann Galtung, in his "The Way is the Goal" book, has written, "Gandhi's type of religiousness is becoming more and more important in the world. It is trans-religious, combining elements in Occidental and Oriental thought. There is a general sense of something transpersonal, bigger than all of us. In short, the unity of man idea so often propagated by him." Sadly, what is being strenuously propagated in India today is the Hindutva of V.D. Savarkar, not the Hinduism anchored in truth and respect for all religions as paths for union with the divine, which Gandhi preached, practiced, and lived. Many decades ago, Gandhi had affirmed that earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not for every man's greed. And the real conflict is not between environment and development, but between environment and the reckless exploitation of the earth by man. Extensive corporatization and high-tech innovation in agriculture and the food supply chain in recent years have resulted in tragic outcomes in India and many other countries. In India, almost 300,000 farmers have committed suicide since 1997, when the entry of GM seeds into India was first permitted. P. Sainath, the widely respected agricultural economist, in an article titled "Neoliberal Terrorism in India," has written, "The spate of farmer suicides, the largest sustained wave of such deaths recorded in history, is the result of India's embrace of the brave new world of neoliberalism. For millions of its subsistence farmers, this has meant higher cultivation costs, far greater loans, and being locked into the volatility of global commodity prices. GM seeds have displaced far cheaper and hardier traditional varieties with enthusiastic state support." He has pointed out that in 1991, A farmer could buy a kilogram of local cotton seed for as little as rupees 9 per kilo. By 2003, he had to pay 350 for 400 grams of BT cotton seed. By 2008, the same quantity was being marketed for rupees 1,650. These tragic developments occurred in the first phase of India's much touted agricultural modernization reforms. Its second phase was ushered in 2019 when Government of India brought its 3 new agricultural laws, initially with an ordinance and then with an act of parliament, despite strong resistance to them by almost all opposition parties and organizations. Notable in this context is that Vandana Shiva, the Gandhi-inspired agricultural scientist, has been promoting ahimsic Swadeshi agriculture based on traditional varieties and methods of seed-stroke farming since 1991. She avers the path to reverse the agrarian distress and end farmer suicides is chemical-free, corporate-free traditional farming. It has been reported there have been no suicides among those farmers who adopted these methods. Over a century ago, Gandhi had foreseen that labor-saving machines save labor by making laborers redundant. He had urged production by the masses instead of mass production. He wanted humans to be industrious, not like a machine, but like the busy bee. His choice of the charkha as his mascot for employment generation, ridiculed by many economists of his day as antediluvian, revived India's traditional cottage and village industries. The multiplicity of their handmade products, which include cotton, wool, and silk garments, and shawls, carpets, brass and marbleware, bone and wooden structures, etc., presently employ over 30 million artisans and earn India over 3 billion a year in export earnings. Sadly, in recent years, India and many other countries, including highly developed ones, have been modernizing their industries in order to make them more productive and globally competitive. This has resulted in widespread unemployment. A 2017 OECD report indicated that in 2016, 36.9 million people were unemployed in OECD countries. In Greece, Spain, Italy, and Kenya, unemployment was 46.6%, 38.6%, 37%, and 42% respectively. In India, it had averaged 7.32% during the 2005-2014 period, mainly because of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme. However, according to the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, in April 2020, its unemployment had peaked to an all-time high of 23.5%. In the developed countries, artificial intelligence applications in manufacturing and service industries has already made some professions obsolete. Automated billing and drones have eliminated thousands of jobs in the accountancy and delivery business. Robotics will soon make even nurses in hospitals, chefs in restaurants, and chauffeurs in trucks redundant. The World Economic Forum has estimated that by 2025, over 5 million jobs will be lost in 15 developed and developing economies. Bill Gates has suggested that governments should discourage automation and tax companies which resort to it. Jack Ma, chairman of Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant, has made a more Gandhian suggestion, which is that machines should only do what humans cannot. Only in this Only in this way can we have the opportunities to keep machines as working partners with humans rather than as replacements. Rachel Carson is often lauded as the modern ecological pioneer because of her 1962 book, Silent Spring. Yet 30 years earlier, Gandhi had written, "What we are doing to the forests of the world is but a reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another." It is a well-established scientific fact that where forests are denuded of trees, rain ceases. Where trees are planted, rains are attracted, and the volume of water received increases with the increase of vegetation. The earth, air, land, and water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand over to them at least what was handed over to us. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was deeply influenced by Mahatma Gandhi, made an important early contribution to environmental protection in India by supporting the Chipko tree protection movement and banning deforestation in the Himalayan foothills. She attended the 1972 Stockholm Conference on Human Environment and urged that poverty elevation is essential for environmental protection. The UN Environment Program was set up later that year. Former US Vice President Al Gore has campaigned extensively in recent years to highlight the global warming threat. He has pointed out that 20 of the hottest years on record have occurred within the last 25 years, and that the stark consequences are increased drought, forest fires, more destructive hurricanes, melting of solar ice caps and glaciers, which raise ocean levels and will submerge numerous islands and coastal cities and result in much human displacement and loss of animal and plant diversity. Vandana Shiva has proposed a Gandhian solution to the global warming and unemployment crisis. In her book, Soil, Not Oil, she has written, "Two crises of our times, the climate and unemployment crisis, are intimately connected. If we address them separately, we will not solve either. Industrialization replaces the renewable energy of humans and animals with non-renewable energy. For the energy transition beyond oil, we need to bring human energy back into production. This is the largest energy source, inexhaustible, replenishable, and ever-enlarging. Human energy combined with the energy of the sun, wind, air, sea, water, earth, soil, plants, and animals is the best source of sustainable and renewable energy and livelihoods. In sharp contrast to this Gandhian solution are the ultra-high-tech antidotes for global warming, which some scientists and their corporate sponsors have mooted. Most amazing among them is to modify solar brilliance by bombarding sulfate-based aerosols into the atmosphere to deflect the sunlight. Its estimated cost is $50 billion a year. $50 billion a year. Yeah. Globalization has accentuated global social disparities with the high salaries multinational companies offer their employees and the lavish lifestyles they promote. In the US, 5% of its wealthiest own 54% of its wealth. In India, former Reserve Bank of India Governor Bimal Jalan pointed out in December 2009 that the total asset value of India's top 5 billionaires equaled that of its bottom 300 million people. Since then, the number of its billionaires and their wealth has quadrupled, and those at its bottom have doubled. As far as gross misconduct in national governance is concerned, the many political scandals in various countries are indisputable proof. But the best known of these scandals are US President Clinton's Monica Lewinsky affair and the 2009 fraudulent expenditure claims of British MPs, which constrained Michael Martin, Speaker of the House of Commons, to resign and Prime Minister Gordon Brown to apologize on behalf of all politicians. These and other such scandals highlight the imperative need for trustworthy and humane leaders in all spheres of national governance. In global governance, the record is heartening only in respect of the UNGA and UN organizations in the economic, environmental, food, health, housing, disaster, and refugee relief. Notable among UNGA's creditable work is the September 1999 Declaration on the Culture of Peace, which declared the year 2000 as International Year for the Culture of Peace, and the 2001-2010 period as the International Decade for a Culture of Peace and Non-Violence for the Children of the World. On June 27, 2007, it declared October 2nd, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, as International Day of Non-Violence and called upon all member states, UN organizations, and NGOs to disseminate the message of non-violence by all possible means. In sharp contrast to all this, the UN's record, particularly in the last 15 years, the UNSC's record, particularly in the last 15 years, is a dismal one. UNSC, if I may clarify, is the UN Security Council, mandated to maintain international peace and security and fulfill the UN's prime objective, which is to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Its 5 veto-wielding permanent members, generally known as the P5, are the world's largest producers and salesmen of lethal weapons. One of them annually spends more on research production of these weapons than all other UN member states put together. Besides, it has used its veto 39 times to shield a bellicose ally from UNSC resolutions which deplored its aggressive action against its neighboring countries. On many thorny international issues, 3 of the Security Council's P5 have preferred military action to diplomatic conflict resolution. The 2003 Iraq War was embarked upon by a coalition of the willing, assembled and led by 2 of the P5 on the basis of blatant untruths and what the British press described as sexed up intelligence. In open defiance of the Security Council, over 1 million Iraqis have been killed and have been killed and over 4 million displaced by this devastating and illegal war. In Libya, 3 of the P5 misused a 2011 UNSC right to protect resolution to bring about regime change. In doing so, they destroyed most of the infrastructure, including the excellent irrigation system the secular and prosperous authoritarian Arab state had painstakingly built to irrigate its desert. This grave misconduct by 3 UNSC P5 make the reform of this important body and abolition of the P5 veto powers an imperative need for ensuring world peace and stability. This will be a Herculean task but not an impossible one if the struggle to achieve it is strenuously waged in the UNGA and also globally on lines akin to that of the World Social Forum, which is also referred to as the Global Justice Movement. It was born at Puerto Alegre, Brazil in June 2001 with the support of the Brazilian Workers' Party. It met annually to discuss and propose solutions to global political problems. Its first three meetings were held at Puerto Alegre, with participant numbers rising from 12,000 in 2001 to 66,000 in 2003. Its 2004 meeting held at Mumbai was attended by 85,000 activists from over 100 countries. In 2005, 5 regional forums for the Americas, Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa, and Asia were set up, and these have met annually. Its 2015 and 2016 meetings held at Tunis and Montreal were attended by almost 3,000 NGOs from 110 countries. About these activists, David Hardiman has written, "They stand for a human spirit that refuses to be crushed by the leviathan of the modern system of violence, oppression, and exploitation. They aspire for a better, more equitable, and non-violent future. In them, Gandhi, their model, still lives." WSF is the emergence of people's power on the global scale. The internet and social media have contributed greatly to its gestation and rapid growth. Ray Kurzweil, inventor of numerous digital technologies, has lauded Mahatma Gandhi as the prophet of the communication revolution age, and has written, "Mahatma Gandhi's movement is a very good early example of the power of people coming together to change an oppressive reality and achieve that purpose non-violently." He did not have the benefit of electronic communication. His idea traveled mostly by word of mouth. The internet has demonstrated the power to organize the voices of the oppressed in non-violent but effective ways. The civil rights movement in the United States, led by Martin Luther King, in which I participated, was directly inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. King made frequent references to him. I cannot think of another example in human history in which ordinary people organized themselves peacefully and brought about great change. During the 2008-2016 period, when Barack Obama was US President, photos of Gandhi and Martin Luther King adorned the Oval Office. Though Churchill had derided Gandhi as a seditious, half-naked fakir, a statue of Gandhi of equal size as that of Churchill now faces him just outside Parliament House in London. Sadly, in India, in recent years, Gandhi and all that he stood for, truth, non-violence, communal harmony, and concern for the poorest and most disadvantaged humans, is being steadily replaced with numerous untruths, anti-minority hatreds, and violent acts, including lynchings and rape. All this has been happening after an ultra-nationalist political party whose ideological icon is Gandhi's arch rival and ideological antipode, V.D. Savarkar. It began within 2 months of this party coming to power in March 1998. On May 11th of that year, it blew to smithereens, literally, India's 4-decade-long Gandhi-inspired nuclear disarmament policy with 4 nuclear bomb explosions. In February 2003, it installed Savarkar's photo in Parliament, despite nearly all political parties strongly opposing it. Since coming to power again in May 2001, it has actively promoted Hindutva, Savarkar's hate-replete anti-minority ideology. This has resulted in recurrent attacks on Muslim and Christian places of worship and shops, and lynching and rapes of members of minority communities and Dalits. The latest victim is a young police officer of New Delhi's Civil Defense Force, who was not only raped, but also brutally stabbed to death 57 times by goons. Equally shameful is the rewriting of Indian history to erase the many valuable contributions of its Muslim rulers as also of its freedom fighters. The most notable example of this is the recent omission of Jawaharlal Nehru from the 75th anniversary of India's independence poster of the Indian Council for Cultural Research. Concerns for India's poor and disadvantaged is almost totally absent in the new India, except in slogans and adverts about what its Savarkarite central and state governments have and are doing for them. Enormous amounts are spent on constructing temples and statues and in beautifying cities and railway stations, not on upgrading schools, hospitals, and rural health centers. Worst of all, a highly expensive military-grade spyware has been acquired and used to spy not only on politicians and journalists, but also on Supreme Court judges. What should Gandhians and patriotic Indians who resent this tragic transformation of our beloved millennial India do to stem this gruesome slide towards fascism? They need to do what Gandhi had urged, to be the change we wish to see in the world and educate the masses of their capacity to regulate and control authority when it is abused. Gandhi showed the way. My life is my message, he said, and regularly published newsletters, Indian Opinion in South Africa and Young India and Harijan in India. He also held prayer meetings and led padayatras and satyagrahas. All these were part of his broad-based spectrum to change people's mindsets through community education. ICI, the Indian Society for Community Education, has been doing this with dedicated determination since 1982. The Muslim women of Shaheen Bagh were the first group to morally and publicly oppose the much-touted New India. In December 2019, hundreds of them came with their children and grandchildren and did a sit-in on a highway for many days, reciting poetry and singing songs. Saeed Akhtar Mirza, in a scroll article in May 2020, wrote about them thus: the women of Shaheen Bagh sat down on a cold December day in 2019 for an indefinite satyagraha. And satyagraha it was, because it was a battle for the truth. They waved the national flag in front of a large blow-up of the preamble of the Constitution of India and portraits of freedom fighters of the past: Gandhi, Ambedkar, Maulana Azad, Bhagat Singh, Ram Prasad Bismil, Chandrasekhar Azad, and Asfakullah, all heroes of a secular dream for the country. Armed with these icons, the women prepared for the struggle ahead on a highway. In November 2020, the Samyukta Kisan Morcha launched a similar sit-in at three main entry points into New Delhi, when their entry into it was blocked with iron spikes and large cement blocks. They have been protesting against the three unjust farm laws which benefit agricultural cooperatives rather than them. Besides the sit-in, which is the world's largest, longest, best organized farmers' resistance uprising to unjust laws and authoritarianism. They have also been holding Mahapanchayats in various parts of the country. Farmers from every religious community, including their wives and children, are participating in them. For individuals like us, social media offers ample opportunities to reach out to like-minded Indians and induce them to join this wide spectrum soul force resistance to injustice, hatred, lynchings, and rape-ridden New India, and speak the truth to power, as Supreme Court Judge Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has recently urged. I shall end here thanking the Indian Society for Community Education, its board and the chairman of its board and its trustee for inviting me to deliver this lecture, all those distinguished people who have attended this lecture, and for giving me the attention that they have in the past 45 minutes. Many, many thanks, and God bless you all.
आदरणीय नजरत जी, दिवेटिया साहेब અને અન્ય ઉપસ્થિત વડીલો અને મિત્રો, નજરતજીએ એટલા બધા વ્યાપક ક્ષેત્ર ઉપર ગાંધી વિચારને મૂલ્યો કે આખી દુનિયાની સફર કરી અને આવ્યા હોય એવું 45 મિનિટમાં લાગે છે. ગાંધીજીને અનુસરવાનો, ગાંધીજીને સમજવાનો, ગાંધી વિચાર વિશે વિચાર કરવાનો બધાનો સમય ઘણા વખત બાકી ગયો છે. ને આપણે દરેક ડિકેડ બાય ડિકેડ જોઈએ છીએ કે નવા નવા પ્રશ્નો ઊભા થાય છે ને એ બધાનો ઉકેલ ક્યાંક ને ક્યાંક ગાંધી વિચારમાં દેખાય છે. અને તેમ છતાં આપણે ગભરાઈએ છીએ રસ્તા ઉપર જતા, કારણ કે એક જે આપણા બધાના મનની અંદર એક ખોટી પણ માન્યતા ઘૂસી ગઈ છે. ગાંધીજીનો રસ્તો એ બહુ અઘરો છે અને ગાંધીજી પ્રમાણે જીવવું એ પણ બહુ મુશ્કેલ છે. એક વસ્તુ લોકોના મનની અંદર બેસી ગઈ છે અને ગાંધી વિચારમાં જે હિંમત આગળ વધવું જોઈએ એ આગળ વધવામાં આપણે નિષ્ફળ જઈએ છીએ. નઝરતજી, આઈ એમ વેરી હેપી ટુ હિયર યુ on this, and that this has really encouraged us to work more on Gandhian ideology, particularly with youth. And I always feel that the least attention has been given to the Hindu-Muslim unity, which Gandhiji gave a very important place in his 18 Rachanatmak constructive programs. So I think your lecture has encouraged us to look into those aspects and work something on this. I'm also very thankful to you for accepting our invitation, and we had a very lovely communication, very warm communication all this 1.5 months or maybe little more, that we would always remember you, and we feel so homely with you that I feel that you will be now onwards will be a part of our Indian Society for Community Education. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I also thank Mr. Divetia for being present and all the trustees who are present here. I also thank all the distinguished guests who are here in the YouTube as well as on the Zoom. And because it is your participation, મારી ભાગીદારીથી જ આ પ્રસંગ જે છે એ પ્રસંગ આટલા વર્ષોથી ઉજવાતો આવ્યો છે અને 21મા વ્યાખ્યાન સુધીમાં અમારા બધાના સહકારે અમને ઘણા પ્રોત્સાહિત કર્યા છે. એટલે આપ સૌનો પણ ખૂબ આભાર માનું છું. આ તબક્કે વિશ્વકોશનો પણ ખાસ આભાર માનું છું કે આ જે બીજાનું વ્યવસ્થાથી આપણે તમને સૌને પહોંચી શક્યા છીએ ઊભી કરવાની અંદર વિશ્વકોશે અમને ખૂબ મદદ કરી છે અને એમનું ઇન્ફ્રાસ્ટ્રક્ચર અમને વાપરવા આપ્યું છે. એટલે શ્રી કુમારપાળભાઈ અને એમની આખી ટીમ, કિશોરભાઈ, કૃપાબેન, બધાનો ખૂબ આભાર માનું છું. આપ સૌ અહીંયા આવ્યા એ માટે ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર. Thank you all, and we finish our program here, and those who want to leave can leave. Yeah. If you have any questions on this, you can send us through email. कुछ सवाल है, हमारा कोई प्रश्न हो, તમે અમને ISC પર email થી મોકલી શકશો. It is ischouse@gmail.com, and Nazrat ji has been kind enough to accept that he will answer those questions through email. So anybody having any questions from this lecture can always send us to the ISC.
Mahesh Raval from Canada.
Huh?
Yeah, you're still there. Many, many thanks.
No, thank you very much. And really, it was very informative and enjoyable. And
And I spoke at the right volume, and
yeah. It was, everything was all right.
yeah,
Everything was all right. It must have reached to our listeners very, I think.